You are listening to the Nightline Sports Network, brought to you by Travis Dever and the Dever team, 386-690-1636.
Welcome to the AAC Report, only on the Nightline Sports Network. I'm Jeff Allen. Coming up, we're going to talk to Dustin Sam from the Scott Holman Pawdcast as we do our college basketball check-in on first place Houston. We will get to those guys in just a little bit. Meanwhile, the AAC has announced that the Air Force Reserve will serve as the title sponsor for the conference's 2022 men's and women's basketball championships. The 2022 Air Force Reserve American Athletic Conference Women's Basketball Championship will take place March 7th through the 10th, and the 2022 Air Force Reserve American Athletic Men's Basketball Championship. Want to make sure that we get the titles all in, make the sponsor happy. That'll be held March 10th through the 13th, both championships to take place at Dickies Arena in Fort Worth, Texas. Air Force Reserve has been a title sponsor of the Americans Basketball Championships since 2019. As we mentioned as far as the men's basketball is concerned, Houston is leading the conference at 6-0, 17-2 overall. SMU right behind them in second at 5-1, 14-4 overall. Temple is in third at 4-2, 11-6 overall. And then three other teams at 4-3, UCF, Cincinnati, and Tulane, as far as their conference records are concerned. The men's basketball player of the week is Kyler Edwards of Houston. Second week in a row after averaging 24 points, 7.5 rebounds, and 5.5 assists as they had victories over South Florida and East Carolina. The freshman of the week is Darius Johnson of UCF. He averaged 16.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 3 assists as they had a couple of come-from-behind wins over East Carolina and Tulane. Turning to women's basketball, SMU is leading the conference at 3-0, 9-6 overall. UCF in second, 4-1, 12-3 overall. Also, South Florida's 4-1, 14-5 overall. Temple 3-1, 8-7 overall, as far as the top of the standings are concerned. The player of the week is Alina Sinecki of South Florida, as she averaged 27.5 points per game in a pair of victories last week for the Bulls as they beat Tulsa and Temple. And the freshman of the week, Anya Gordine of Temple, 9 points, 6.5 rebounds, and 6.5 assists per game as the Owls went 1-1 last week as they beat East Carolina but lost to South Florida. All right, do we check in with Dustin Sam from the Scott Holman Pawdcast as we look at Cougs basketball? That's next when the AAC report comes back after this.
Hey, this is Travis Dever, Kai's Real Estate, the Dever team, New Smyrna Beach. Your source for real estate and everything else, New Smyrna Beach. Proud sponsor of Nightline. Call me anytime at 386-690-1636. That's 386-690-1636. Let me show you my hometown, New Smyrna Beach, UCF's favorite beach. Go Knights and charge on.
An auto accident can change your life forever. At Chad Barr Law, we are raising the bar on what to expect from your personal injury attorney. Hi, I'm Chad Barr, and I want you to know that our entire team is dedicated to providing you with the representation you deserve in your greatest time of need. If you or a loved one have been injured in an auto accident, call 407-599-9036 for a free consultation or visit chadbarlaw.com. At Chad Barr Law, our clients come to us in need and leave as family. Offices, Altamont Springs.
Looking for more out of your Porsche? Look no further than Flat6Motorsports.com. They have the widest selection of aftermarket Porsche parts anywhere in the world. With over 85 product lines and in-depth expertise, Flat6Motorsports.com is your one-stop shop for any Porsche performance needs. Whether you're shopping for intakes, exhausts, suspension, or tuning, they have you covered. Flat6Motorsports.com is the premier Porsche aftermarket specialist. Check them out at Flat6Motorsports.com.
All right, we now check in on the Houston Cougars as our coverage of college basketball continues on the AAC report. And as always, we bring in Dustin and Sam from the Scott Holman Pawdcast. Guys, thanks again for being here.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. Always good to talk to you.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Thanks for having us on.
All right, so the 7th-ranked Cougars enjoying another stellar season in the American, 6-0 in conference, 17-2 overall. Let's get your initial thoughts, gentlemen, on the season to date so far.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you take into account, obviously, the top headline is Marcus Sasser and Tremont Mark being out for the year, and that being two of Houston's top players, if not Houston's two top players. So I think that's certainly just the kind of the headline story that everyone always leads with, and for good reason. I think Houston before those injuries was a genuine national title contender. I don't know that I would use that term to describe this team at present. I wouldn't. This is, I think, still a team that people aren't going to want to play in March for sure. But to be undefeated in conference at this point, to have genuinely earned from the start of the season until now, a top 10 ranking, and I think every metric that there basically is, human or computer or otherwise, I think is just it's an unbelievable testament to the players that are still healthy. It's an unbelievable testament to this coaching staff and what they've done, and just the unbelievable linear improvement that they seem to get from every player that enters this program that allows that kind of thing to just happen seemingly year after year in this program. It's a program that honestly makes me feel like I thought about this recently. I feel like 2012 Dustin is having a fever dream about the craziest possible outcome for Houston Cougar basketball, and this is essentially what we're living through. So obviously, just as a fan, you just got to be unbelievably over the moon with how everything has gone, given the adversity that this team has faced.
And I would add something I'm sure we'll touch on, coming in future questions from you, but I think it's been an incredible testament to the evaluation of Kelvin Sampson and this staff, and also just how they've retooled this roster on the fly, even with what I would say is a very veteran, very skilled group of front court players, the most skilled group of front court players I would say Kelvin Sampson's had since he's gotten here. When Tremont Mark and Marcus Sasser were healthy, this was still very much a guard forward team, a guard centric team, a team that's going to get a lot of its scoring from the guard groups, even with all the positives that you had, even when the whole roster was healthy, from the likes of Fabian White Jr., Josh Carlton, Wani Roberts, and Reggie Chaney, just to name some of the front court guys. And the evaluation, because you look at the present rotation, it was a lot of guys who either played a very minimal role on last year's team or just flat out weren't on the roster. Kyler Edwards, last year, your leading guard, your really only volume scorer currently was on Texas Tech's roster this time last year. Tajay Moore, your stopper, kind of doing a lot of the things that Dejan Jarreau did last year's team. I think Sands, the point guard stuff, was on Cal State Bakerfield's roster a year ago. Jamal Shedd was on the roster, but was playing a significantly reduced role to what he is now. I think we had high hopes generally for what Jamal Shedd was going to do, but I don't think Dustin and I, even our most optimistic hopes, in October and November, thought Jamal Shedd would be giving you what he's been giving you now. So to be able to do what this team has done, like Dustin said, minus two varying degrees of all conference caliber guard and Tremont Mark and Marcus Sasser, it's nothing short of astounding. And yes, there's a bit of the meat of the schedule and conference play still left to go. But I think simply the fact that we're talking about a 17-2 team that's won its first 6 conference games, at least, a few of those away from the Fertitta Center, I think it's nothing short of astounding. And certainly, even taking my fan biases into account here, I think should have Kelvin Sampson in the short conversation for National Coach of the Year.
And speaking of that coaching stance that he has, because, you look at the losing the players to injury. But do you think the fact that the calling card of a Kelvin Sampson team is a team that plays defense and just dominates on the boards, that structure and that foundation allows them to overcome that kind of adversity easier?
Yeah, I would agree. I think it raises your floor a lot. That you're always going to have, I think at this point in the build, at this point, early on, I think the staff had to maybe take some players that you were getting 4 and 5 stars interested in Houston Cougar basketball, quite frankly, in 2015 and 2016. You had to take guys who maybe weren't developed in certain areas, and you still hit on guys like Rob Gray and Devin Davis, who formed the core of the early really good Sampson teams here. But this staff's the point now where they can be choosy enough with who they bring in that you're not going to bring in, for Kelvin Sampson at this point, any guys who are liabilities in terms of defensive effort, in terms of defensive skill, in terms of willingness to rebound. I memean, Josh Carlton, you look at his UConn career, really, it wasn't a bad career, but really didn't feel like he'd realized his potential other than, a good, I think, sophomore season, Kevin Ollie's last year there. And then he comes into this program that really emphasizes offensive rebounding more than the UConn program he was previously a part of. And you're seeing him, you get his skill unlocked. So I think it's the culture of the program, obviously, first and foremost, but I think it's also the ability of Kelvin Sampson and his staff now to be choosy about the guys they bring in, to have, I think, more guys who meet the criteria of what the staff wants out there willing to play for Houston Cougar basketball than they have slots on this roster. You're seeing that in the high school recruiting now with all three of the high school signees in the 2022 class being varying degrees of top 100 guy. But even as the caliber of this staff, this recruit the staff's brought in has increased, you still know that Kelvin Sampson and the staff aren't going to bring in guys who are going to be liabilities in the defensive end, liabilities in terms of effort and rebounding. And so I think that's been a big part of the culture, but obviously getting the on-court results and being able to be a bit pickier about who you're bringing in, I think obviously plays a not small part in this team being able to not miss a beat without two really key players.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the defense and the rebounding, and I think the key third component there is the turnovers, and Kelvin Sampson teams have always taken really good care of the ball, and that's the case again this year. But what's actually new about this team has always been one of the hardest teams to make a shot against in the country under Kelvin Sampson, consistently top 10 in that category. But this is the best year that they've had under Kelvin Sampson in terms of turning the other team over. And that's, I think, a testament to Jamal Shedd, who's an unbelievable defender and just creates a ton of turnovers. That's a testament to Tajay Moore, who Sam mentioned, who is just an unbelievable playmaker defensively, tenacious defender. So this team is just among the top teams in the country in terms of turnover margin because they both hold on to the ball and turn you over at the same time. And when you add that to the, you're going to get one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the country with Kelvin Sampson at this point. That is just so many extra shots every game that Houston has. At this point, they're averaging a little over 8 more field goal attempts than their opponents per game. That's just 8 extra shots that you get that their team doesn't have. So if you're a little bit down offensively because, Marcus Sasser and Tremont Mark aren't out there, you're still getting 8 extra shots per game. And, you can be at least average offensively and win a heck of a lot of games if you're getting 8 extra shots per game. So the fact that Houston not only has the rebounding, but they consistently are. I think they're top 10 in both effective field goal percentage, and I think number 3 in offensive rebounding percentage right now. So just everything you can do to win the game without making a shot has always kind of been the hallmark of Kelvin Sampson teams, and that is, I think, the most that it has ever been the case this year.
Of course, last year, obviously, the team had great success going to the Final Four. I know that's a tough order, no matter what, to do that year in and year out. But how much is that experience? Does that play any role in this season at all?
I don't think so. Not to I would say no would be my lean, just because of the way that Kelvin Sampson is, and he's the epitome of the coach who's always coaching, and he's not giving these guys any time to rest on their laurels, and he's made it clear that this team hasn't done anything yet. This team hasn't gone to the Final Four. This team is its own team, and Kelvin Sampson flat out said that it became a new team when they opened conference play, because that was when they didn't have Mark or Sasser anymore. So it's essentially a team that has played 6 games together at this point. I think it's just, I think you have to let the season play out and see what's ahead. But it's, I'm sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there. I got lost on a tangent there, but
I'll come in to rescue here.
Sam, help me out here, Sam.
I would say also, and to add on, I would agree with Dustin's general answer. I think part of it also is just because the volume of experience that isn't on the court right now for you. You graduated 3 good starters on last year's team. Well, varying degrees of good start. Quentin Grimes, your program's first consensus All-American since the 5 Slamma Jamma days. Dejan Giroux, the best one-on-one defender in the American, certainly the the guy who I think was the tip of the spear defensively for what the Cougars wanted to do, in addition to being a great distributor guard, and Justin Gorham, a great offensive rebounding big man. Those guys are all playing professional basketball somewhere right now, and you're missing Tremont Mark and Marcus Sasser. I mean, that's 5 guys right there who just aren't on the court for you. I think there are guys in this team who played a role there. Fabian White was able to come back for the tournament last year incredibly off of an ACL injury. Reggie Chaney was a role player. Jamal Shedd was at least on the bench there, but not a lot of cumulative experience there. And I think I would echo the stuff Dustin said about it just being a new year. I think Kelvin Sampson has been quietly very confident since early last offseason. I think it was notable how confident he was, I think, it's seemingly last offseason. But I would still say it's a new year, and I don't know if there's a big carryover there, at least in terms of the on-the-court product from the Final Four team to now.
Well, you look at the record so far, 17-2. The only 2 losses are to a Wisconsin team that's 11th ranked in the country and Alabama. And as you said, 6-0 in conference. And you look at the last couple of ball games, taking care of business against teams they should take care of business against with big romps over South Florida and East Carolina.
Yeah, I'm keeping the stat off the socials because I want it to be for either podcast listeners or listeners to your show. But I actually looked it up. The 43-point win against ECU this past Saturday, that margin was more than every single ECU loss prior to that combined. So ECU had lost 6 games prior by a combined 42 points, and then lost by 43 when they went to the Fertitta Center on Saturday. That's how dominant that performance was, because I don't like to indulge the dumbest opinions out there, but I saw some people being like, well, they did just beat ECU. And it's just like, ECU's not going out there and losing by 43 every night. ECU's not going out there and scoring 36 each night. I think, and that game was the high level of what you're going to see from this team. But I think it was a demonstration that the ceiling is still pretty high. I kind of agree with Dustin. I don't know if the ceiling is the same as it is with, Sasser and Mark being there, because I think, Dustin talked about, I kind of talked about it. This team is always going to be very difficult to make shots against. This team is always going to be very difficult to keep off the offensive boards, no matter who Kelvin Sampson throws in the court there. But I think having Sasser and Mark, which unfortunately we don't have now, raised the offensive ceiling to a stratosphere that I'm not even sure last year's Final Four team was in. And that's kind of the tantalizing what if about this season. But, you're really starting to see guys, I think, figure out their role now. I think there was some needing to figure out who's going to fill in for what Marcus Sasser and Tremont Mark were doing for this team, whether that was guards stepping into their role and big men like Fabian White and Josh Carlton taking a whole lot more of the offense than a big man has really taken into Kelvin Sampson here. So I think I'm not going to say that this 43-point win over ECU was the beginning of U of A steamrolling the rest of their schedule, because I think, as alluded to earlier, I think they're plenty of challenging conference games ahead. I don't know if the first 6 games, as much as I think it's a statement that this team is 6-0 with everything they've gone through against those conference opponents, I still do think you've got difficult conference opponents. I think starting with UCF this coming Saturday in Orlando on the horizon. But I do think you're really starting to see Kyler Edwards become comfortable being the volume scorer, Jamal Shedd really being comfortable. I think stepping sort of into what Dejan Giroux kind of did last year. He's a very different player than Dejan Giroux. They're just 2 guys that are built very differently, but being kind of the bulldog defensive guy that's going to take the toughest guard matchup. And I think you're seeing those guys really over the last month or so as conference play has started become comfortable with their role. Obviously, very contingent, I think, future success on having this group of guys healthy. I think we'd all prefer in Cougar fandom not to see another critical starter kind of go down for an extended period of time. But I really do think you're starting to see this team come into its own, even if I think the ECU performance was kind of an outlier and the real extreme positive.
Yeah, I think you obviously got to be thrilled with the ECU game, which went about just as well as it could have possibly gone. And the season as a whole, which up to this point has gone about as good as it possibly could have gone. It is worth mentioning that Houston's remaining road games, UCF, Cincinnati, SMU, Wichita, Tulane, Memphis. That might be Houston's 6 toughest conference games, and I don't know if they've played any of them yet. So I think it is worth mentioning that the strength of schedule does get tougher the rest of the season. But like we mentioned, Houston is a team that's essentially played 6 games together at this point. So if any team in the country has the potential to get better down the stretch, and I mean, and in Kelvin Sampson's team, every year that he's been here, it's one of those just unbelievable, mind-bending like consistencies is that his teams just get better over the course of the season. So I think what we saw from the ECU game was a hint that like, oh yeah, this team is still getting better, is still figured some things out, in that game. And it's certainly, it's one data point, and you got a lot of tough games going forward, but it is a positive data point. And like I said, at this point, Kelvin Sampson hasn't really given us anything to doubt. So I'm excited for some of these tough conference matchups to on the road to really find out just exactly how good this team is and can be.
Yeah, and of course, as we start to enter the month of February, this is when the rubber starts to hit the road now. And you mentioned the upcoming schedule, with UCF coming up on Saturday. And, that could end up being a really good game or not, because UCF is like the Jekyll and Hyde of the league this year. They either play really great or they play really bad. They've had to, come from behind their last 2 ball games. Tulane's been somewhat of a surprise this year to some degree, as they've had upward momentum. Cincinnati obviously will be tough, and then your favorite antagonist to the north at SMU, which right now sits second in the conference. So this is I guess you really start to get a good litmus test of what your team is all about at this stage.
Yeah, this is when the rubber meets the road for sure, and I think Houston has benefited from the fact that they've gotten some of their easier games. Like SMU is the only single loss team in the conference, so Houston has at least a 2-game cushion on everybody else. And I should say, I said their toughest games. Temple is 3-2 at this point, so maybe 6 of their 7 toughest road games maybe are still to come. We'll throw Temple in there. I guess we'll give them some credit, but yeah, I think it's the standings favor Houston pretty good at this point. They rescheduled the Cincinnati game that they missed, so they've got all their games on the schedule, and obviously we're hoping to see everyone play the full schedule this year, and not have to have it come down to percentage points, which is still maybe a little bit of a sore subject for Houston fans at this point. But definitely, just like I said, I think we're going to find out exactly how good this team is and can be based on how they I think they'll have a good chance of doing pretty well at home. They've won 36 games in a row now at the Fertitta Center. But those road games are going to really, like I said, be the kind of the litmus test of, is this a top 10 team? Is this a top 20 team? Exactly what seed are you going to get come Selection Sunday?
All right, and Sam, would you want to add anything to that?
No, I think I co-sign everything Dustin said there. I do think this isn't going to be a team that's going to go undefeated in conference play. I think there's 2 or 3 at least losses in there. Again, I don't know if we've gotten an elusive 2 or 3 bid AAC this year. I do think it's going to be a 2-bid league. I'm not sure who the second one is, but I do think UCF is going to get a lot of help from, I think, really strong win at Miami. The home win over Michigan, a very decisive home win, if memory serves. But I'm curious. I'm curious to see what this looks like. I don't think it's going to be an undefeated team, but like Dustin said, this has been, for a good several years now, a program that has played its best basketball, February and March, and at the really critical times of the year. And I'm interested to see how this team responds. Another absurdly consistent thing. I think the thing I actually thought Dustin was setting up for here is this program has not lost 2 games in a row since the 2017 NIT. And it was the 27 NIT.
After losing in the conference tournament
up in Hartford, I believe, against UConn.
Or UConn.
Yeah, it was the year UConn won the conference tournament and got in that way.
And then we lost to Akron the first game at the H&PE arena on TSU's campus because they had just started building the Fertitta Center.
So that's been almost 5 years since U of H has lost 2 games in a row. So I'm interested to see how this team, once it hits the real meat of conference schedule, stacks up against just some absurdly consistent teams the last several years prior to them.
Yeah, and do you think we're also in another case too, where I think this almost sounds like we could rewind this from the last couple of years, where the American has a terrific basketball conference, but because they don't get the respects, it ends up being a cannibalization situation as far as the number of bids that they can get.
Yeah, although I think don't get me wrong, I very much enjoy on a personal level Memphis like falling on its face after signing more 5 stars than any other program out there. But I can say honestly, it would be a net positive for the league if there was if Memphis was actually getting that talent to play up to its ranking. If Memphis was some degree of solidly on the right side bubble at large team, or UCF, or just insert name of school right now. I do think there are a lot of programs that are in that tier below that. There's some degree of at-large program, and at-large teams are still very difficult teams to beat at their place generally. So I think that's also kind of the problem for the American, is just a lot of programs that are still good enough to give you a tough road game if you're a team like U of H that's aspiring to create an NCAA tournament resume, but maybe not the overall strength to where whoever the champion is goes in at the end of the season has maybe a 15-3, 16-2 record, and you still do get the detractors pointing out that there's only one or two tournament caliber teams, which I think ignores the fact that there are tough teams in the tier below that. And I think just it's kind of the clock's kind of running out for the AAC to figure itself out as a basketball conference. Those teams, with our respective schools and Cincinnati leaving in a couple years. And just we're still kind of looking to the clock, waiting for Memphis and Wichita to take that level from tough conference opponent, in Wichita's case, a team with a couple NCAA tournament bids, to a real butt kicker, a real minimum top 30 or 40 net kind of team. So yeah, we are dealing with kind of the cannibalization and kind of fighting reputation too, I guess, to a degree.
Yeah, I think to kind of piggyback on what Sam said, I think what the AAC needs is another top 25 team. Houston has established that they're a very high-level team at this point. Who is the other top 25 team that you just expect to put out a top 25 and be be in the tournament? Like, there has to be at least one other team in the conference, because when there's not, that means that for everybody else in the conference, you're getting 1 to 2 shots at that level of a team every year, and it's when you play Houston, and the other teams. The other games in your conference are just games that are, that are just kind of going to hurt you in the metrics if you lose, and aren't going to really help you that much if you win. Whereas I think if you get to 2 or even, heaven forbid 3 teams that you're kind of playing at that level, then all of a sudden that makes it a lot easier for the cannibalization to not matter, that you can go, 10-6 or, 11-5 in conference, and that the committee is going to still say, okay, yeah, that's okay, because, you played a bunch of good teams, as opposed to, maybe 2 or 3 games maximum against, teams that really are going to kind of help you in the metrics. And, the games, they're games that they don't hurt you if you lose, because they don't look that bad, and they help you if you win. So I think the American Athletic Conference has been starved from not having enough of that type of game on their conference schedules.
Yeah. I was just going to say, we kind of thought Wichita was going to be that team when they joined 3 or 4 years ago. And we also, main jokes on the subject aside, probably thought Memphis was going to at least have 1 year like that when they hired Penny Hardaway and he started signing every blue chip basketball player under the sun.
Yeah, and Memphis started to show it a little bit last year, but then they've fallen off. Cincinnati, was at the top of the conference. They look like they're fighting their way back this year, but still they're not what they were. So yeah, it's definitely intriguing as far as the AAC is concerned. Well, gentlemen, as always, appreciate having you on. Please plug away what you got coming up with your endeavors.
Just continuing to do our weekly thing. So you can always find us, the Scott Holman Podcast, of course, podcast PAWDCAST, wherever you get podcasts. And we are Twitter degenerates, so make sure to give us a follow on the Twitters if you're not already, at SH Podcast, the same corny spelling of podcast that I mentioned before.
Outstanding, yes, and always an excellent Twitter follow, especially on game days. All right.
Too kind. Thank you so much, Jeff.
No problem. Dustin Sam, as always, we appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks again, Jeff.
Yep, great having you.
And we'll be right back with some final news and notes after this.
If you haven't figured it out yet, I love Tijuana Flats. I would love them even if they weren't a partner with us on the Nightline Sports Network. They have all kinds of great Tex-Mex food, and it's fresh, by the way. Made to order burritos, tacos, enchiladas, chimichangas, quesadillas, bowls, nachos, and taco salads. And if you haven't tried the queso, you are completely missing out. It is the best queso that I've ever had in my life. Absolutely hands down. And the sauce bar that they have, Everything from wild to mild in there. Absolutely awesome stuff. Not only do I love the food at Tijuana Flats, but I love the company, a UCF-born company, and they give back to the community with the Justin Queso Foundation. So head to your local Tijuana Flats. Tex-Mex for everyone. Hey Jeep Wrangler owners, have you ever sat in your office at work and watched the rain just pour into your Jeep because the weatherman said that there was a 0 chance of rain? Or you put your doors back on because there was a 100% chance and then not a drop of rain fell? Well, there's a company out there that can help take the worry away and give you the peace of mind to be without your doors. The company's called Life Without Doors. They make waterproof rain curtains and dash covers for Wranglers. Life Without Doors is there to help make the decision to leave the doors at home an easy one. Find out more at lifewithoutdoors.com.
Spice up your company with homemade marketing services from Tasty Gravy Creative. Tasty Gravy serves up the menu of budget-friendly marketing, graphic design, and public relations services customized to your specific goals. Co-owned by a UCF graduate, Tasty Gravy can help refresh your brand, strengthen your online presence, or reinforce your company's message. Contact Tasty Gravy for help with your website, social media, marketing, advertising materials, and more. Visit tastygravy.com.
South Florida senior pitcher Georgina Corrick and Wichita State junior infielder Sydney McKinney were 2 of 50 players that were named to the 2022 USA Softball Collegiate Player of the Year watch list, as announced by USA Softball on Wednesday. Corrick, the reigning 3-time AAC Pitcher of the Year, was named to the preseason watch list for the 3rd straight year and is the 4th pitcher representing the American to be included on the preseason USA Softball watch list in the last 5 seasons, alongside Emily Watson from Tulsa in 2018 and Savannah Hebner from Houston in 2019. McKinney, the 2021 American Softball Player of the Year, landed on the top 50 watch list for the first time. The top 25 finalists for that award would be announced on April 20th. Moving to tennis, the AAC Women's Tennis Player of the Week is Leah Conde Monfort of Tulsa. She's rated number 91 in the Oracle ITA singles ranking. She won her first 3 single matches, all in straight sets. At the number 1 position, went 4-0 doubles play, as the Golden Hurricane have gotten off to a 4-0 start in the dual match season. Turning to track and field, the men's track athlete of the week, Jordan Booker of Houston, had great performances at the Texas Tech Red Raider Open, ran the fastest 200-meter dash in the American this season as of January 25th. Clocking a banked time of 21.05 for the 16th fastest time nationally. He's also tied for the conference's top time in the 60-meter dash, turning in a banked 6.74 in Lubbock. The men's field athlete of the week is Christian Sampe of Houston. Cleared 5.23 meters or 17 feet 1.75 inches for the season best in the pole vault to place second at that Red Raider Open. And that runner mark leads all vaulters in the American this season and ranked nationally at 21st. The women's track athlete of the week, Renee Jones of UCF, the top collegiate finisher in the 60-meter hurdles at the Virginia Tech Hokie Invitational, turning in a runner-up showing overall with a PR time of 8.07, led all competitors in the American in the event and ranked 8th in the 60-meter hurdles in the NCAA. The field athlete of the week, Priscilla Adejacon of Houston, repeating as the top field athlete of the week, as she scored a winning throw of 21.95 meters or 72 feet 0.25 inches on her final attempt to take victory at the Red Raider Open. The College Football Playoff Committee, the Management Committee, has AAC representation now. The Management Committee has appointed Chet Gladchuk, the athletics director at the U.S. Naval Academy. He begins a 3-year term starting this spring. And that'll do it for this week's show. As always, please follow me on Twitter at JeffAllen_88. And you could also follow the Nightline Sports Network at UCF_Nightline. This has been the AAC Report, only on the Nightline Sports Network. I'm Jeff Allen. Thanks for listening.